Hey guys, it's Maya and Happy New Year! I can't believe that 2023 is already over. It was definitely my favorite so far. And not only the memories I made were great, but also all the things that came out. Movies, music, books, even TV shows, and like not even ones that came out, but just ones that I rewatched. They were all so good. So I'm going to talk about all my favorites of 2023. If you can't tell, I sound a little bit nasally. That's because I'm sick, but we're just going to ignore that. I digress. First, I'm going to talk about the movies that came out last year. I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite movies, like based on ratings because of Letterboxd, and then I'll just talk about some of the things I really liked about them. My number one movie of the year was Guardians 3. I think this is just a no-brainer movie of the year. It has a perfect soundtrack, story, and it's just a perfect ending to the trilogy that is Guardians, and I think their stories all just ended so well. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was also just a no-brainer, amazing movie for me. Rachel Zegler and Tom Blythe just ate at their parts, truly. They took what they had and just like made it so much better. And I kind of wish I read the book before I watched this, but I think like the stress factor was just elevated because I didn't know what was going to happen at all. And the music was so good. Another movie that I loved was Little Mermaid. Little Mermaid was one of my favorite Disney movies growing up. I always cried at the end for some reason, and this movie just like made my love for it so much bigger. I think Halle Bailey and John Howard King were just so good in their roles, and they just added all the emotions to the character and made it so more just deeper, and I really liked it. And the songs were just like incredible. Halle Bailey's Part of Your World is so good. An animated movie that I loved was Across the Spider-Verse. Into the Spider-Verse is one of my favorite animated movies, along with Little Mermaid, but I just love that movie so much, so this one was just like added on to the story, and I think it made it so much better, and I don't know, I really liked it. Another movie that I really liked was Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Tom Cruise just does no wrong. I'm convinced this movie had me stressed to the max, but it also was just so good, showed more of his character, showed more of the heart of all the characters in the movie, and I can't wait for the second part to come out because I have no clue what's going to happen. A movie that I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did was Gran Turismo. It's a movie about racing with Nissan. It was so good. What's his face? David Harbour is just so good in his role, and I really think he was the standout in that movie for me. The songs were also great, and I just think the story was really heartfelt, but also just really entertaining. Another movie that I really liked was The Marvels. I know that's really controversial, but I think the dynamic between Kamala, Carol, and Maria were just so natural and good. You could feel the tension, but also the love they had for each other. The humor was so good. Nick Fury did amazing, and I just really liked this movie. I don't care what anyone says. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem was also such a good animated movie. The animation was incredible. I think it brought more heart and love to the Ninja Turtles, which is just like a loved franchise for a while, but I think this really just made it so much better, and the story was so good. A movie that I loved, I went and saw it with my friends in the theater, was Priscilla. I've always loved Elvis, and I guess I didn't really know that much about him and Priscilla's story. I think it was really sad, to be honest. I think Jacob Elordi and the girl who played Priscilla were just so good, and they showed a lot of the emotions that they had when they were in love, and just I didn't know that all that stuff happened, so it made me have a new just perspective on things. Another movie I loved this year was Elemental, animated movie by Pixar, and I just thought it was really cute, heartwarming, and it's just a feel-good Pixar movie, so why can we hate it? A movie that I didn't get to see in theaters but came out on Netflix was Jesus Revolution. I think that movie is so good, and I think that anyone, Christian or not, should watch that because it's just really eye-opening on the story of what happened. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but go watch it. Now we're going to move on to my favorite music of 2023. I think that just a standout person for 2023 was obviously Taylor Swift. My boyfriend's going to hate me for saying this, but I really liked all the music she came out with. Speak Now and 1989 Taylor's version were just like everything I wanted and more. The vault tracks were incredible, and just Eras Tour in itself, I didn't get to go, but I saw the movie in theaters, which was really fun. But I just think that she owned 2023. Another person that I wasn't expecting to like in 2023 was Zach Bryan. His self-titled album came out, and my friends really like him, so I was like, and I like Casey Musgraves, and I heard that she was featured on a song in the album, so I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch it, whatever. Watch it? I'll listen to it, whatever. And I really liked it. I just think that his voice is so smooth, and I've always kind of hated country music, but his is so good. His songwriting is just amazing, and I think his voice and Casey on I Remember Everything is so good, and they blend so well together. So that is for sure my favorite song. An album that came out this year that I really liked was Guts by Olivia Rodrigo. I wasn't the biggest fan of Sour. Like, I liked some of the songs, but I think Guts is just so much better. I know that's not popular, but I just think it's so good. My favorite songs were Pretty Isn't Pretty and probably like Get Him Back. I don't know. I love her music and I love how she's in her like rocker teen era. I don't know. I just think all the songwriting was really good and what she did with the album was very good. Another person that came out with a self-titled album was Lauren Daigle. I actually got to see her in concert this year, which is really cool and made me have a new love for the music that she came out with. But my favorite song on her album is Saint Ferdinand. Her voice is just so pretty. Like that. I really like how she writes her music. I've always been a One Direction girl. I know. But Niall Horan came out with an album this year which was called The Show, and I was just like blown away by his songwriting. His voice has always been so good. I think he's grown the most out of the band, out of all the boys, but I get to see him in concert next year and I'm really excited. But this album was just so good. My favorite songs are Science and probably The Show, but his voice is just so soft and good and he can do no wrong. A TV show that I'll talk about later came out with an album that was based off of the book, and it's called Aurora from Daisy Jones and the Six. This was one of my favorite books that I read this year, so when I found out they were coming out with a show and like Sam Claflin was on it, I was like, okay, I'll get on this. And I watched the show and it was just incredible. The album that came with this just blew my mind, truly. All the songs were so good. They're like, the vibe of all the songs was exactly what I imagined when I read the book. So they've just been on repeat. Look at Us Now is just hits so much harder because of all the things you know about in the book and the show. So that album was definitely a standout for me. I feel like I can't make a video about all the things that came out this year and not mention Barbie in some aspect. Even though the movie wasn't in my top like 10 or 12 movies of the year, the songs were so good that came from it. I think I'm Just Ken is honestly genius. I think it's so funny. Ryan Gosling is hilarious in every role that he has, and the way that he's saying this is just so perfect and it feels so Ken. Another song that I love that came from this was What Was I Made For? I think that the way they just incorporated this song into the movie was so good, and how you heard it throughout the movie and then we actually get to like hear the song at the end. It was so good. Billie Eilish is just, she encapsulated? She showed all the emotions that we felt during the movie in that song, and it was so good. And also Dua Lipa with Dance the Night was just amazing. Another movie soundtrack was the Little Mermaid soundtrack. I think that Halle Bailey has a beautiful voice. Wild Uncharted Waters obviously is one of my new favorite male ballad love songs. I think it was so good, and they were all so amazing in the way they sang the songs. The next category, I guess, is TV shows that came out this year. I think my favorite, like top 3 favorite shows that came out this year was probably Daisy Jones and the Six, Ahsoka, and probably Percy Jackson, even though the whole show hasn't come out yet. I already talked about Daisy Jones obviously, but I was such a big fan of the book, so just to see all the things that I read come to life was just really amazing, and I thought it was really it was portrayed really well. Ahsoka is one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I actually finished the Clone Wars earlier this year, so getting to see her more in live action was just incredible, and seeing all my favorite Rebels characters in live action for the first time made me go insane. And then Percy Jackson, I started that series back in like 4th grade and I never finished it, so I'm rereading it, but just seeing Walker Scobell in his role, he plays Percy just how I imagined, and all the people are so good, but I can already tell it's going to be one of my favorite shows, honestly, because it's just such a good adaptation from the book. Loki season 2 also came out, and I think that was so good. I was never the biggest fan of season 1, but I think this really just added more heart to his character, and I think the story was so interesting. I really liked it, and Ke-Huy Quan being in it made me want to cry every time I saw him on screen. And a couple shows that I watched this year, but they weren't necessarily like new, was Ted Lasso. I've heard a lot of funny things about it, and I thought it would be a good show, and I watched it in literally like 2 weeks. It was so good. I also started Teen Wolf. I haven't finished that, but it's already so good and I'm loving it. And then I watched Rebels, and it's now one of my favorite shows by far. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is all the books that I read this year that were my favorite. The best series that I read this year, which is probably now one of like my favorite series, was the Cool Prince series. Oh my gosh, these books were so good. I read the first one and I hadn't bought the other two, but like literally halfway through the first one, I was like, okay, I need the other two. This is so good. I think the story's so good, and I've never been the biggest fan of fantasy, but I think just stories were so amazing and the characters were interesting and compelling, and like I was just never bored reading them. And I already talked about this obviously, but I started Percy Jackson. I'm now into the third book, but Percy Jackson is just such a good book. I think Rick Riordan is such a good author, and he just adds so much heart to his characters, and I can't wait to see all these books come to life in the near future. I also read Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. It's a Christian book, and I think that everybody should read it, honestly. It's so good. The movie came out maybe this year, I don't remember, but I watched the movie and I thought it was really good, and then my Bible teacher gave me the book because he said the movie's good, but this is so much better, and I read it and he was totally right. It added so much to the story. There's so much they left out in the movie, which is like fine, but once I read the book, I'm like, okay, the book is way better. And then, not a favorite book, but just something I learned about books, Taylor Jenkins Reid is by far my new favorite author. I've read probably more than half of her books, and I just think her stories are always so interesting, but always so like calm in a way. There's nothing like crazy happening, but it just keeps you compelled throughout the whole story, and I can never figure out why, but her writing is just so real and it's not too extra. It just gets to the story, and I love everything she does. So those are going to be all my favorites of 2023. I know I talked kind of fast and not well. I said good probably 57 times, but I truly loved all the things that came out last year. I can't wait for 2024. There's so many good, again, movies and music coming out, and I'm just so excited to watch everything. So I hope you guys have a good year.